Are you bored yet? My name is Ante Brembacka and I'm here to give you a challenge. With the corona situation we're facing, we as martial artists have been forced to rethink the way we train and teach martial arts. The internet is full of online classes with instructors teaching from their dojo, so you can watch them at home and practice yourself. So yes, you can take care of the physical part, no problem. I'm here to give you a challenge that will help you to keep your martial art brain fine-tuned while you're staying at home. So the challenge is create your own kata. This is a challenge I threw to a few of my most senior students, and I was really happy with how the thing turned out. So I thought, well, I might as well throw the same challenge at you. I can remember creating my first kata back in the 80s. Luckily I forgot it and there were no video cameras around that time. With the knowledge I had back then, it was mostly putting some cool looking moves after each other, and I can recall it had some spinning back kicks and jumping kicks in it. Obviously that's not the point with this video. So then, how do you create your own kata? Well, first of all, you need to understand the so-called HAPV theory by Hanshi Patrick McCarthy. And that includes knowing that karate kata were not created for tournaments, not for the battlefield, but it was kind of culmination of lessons, self-defense lessons already learned. We need to go through 4 steps: HAPVs, defensive themes, corresponding solo components, and finally a geometrical configuration what will turn out to be your kata. So the first one, HAPV, habitual acts of physical violence. That means the way people attack other people if they want to hurt them, for example in the street. And please keep in mind, the attacker is not necessarily someone experienced in martial arts, could be anyone. So obviously the attack will not be an oitsuki from a perfect senkotsudachi. Rather, it will be different kinds of grabs, swinging punches, tackles, all sorts of things you can think of. If you think of a person that doesn't necessarily have any martial arts background, but just is aggressive and want to hurt somebody. So considering your own kata, you need to decide what habitual acts of physical violence do you want to address. So you can limit to just a small area, for example different kinds of grabs, or you can just come up with something that covers self-defense in a broader perspective. Next, you need to know what are the defensive themes that will be functional to address the habitual acts of physical violence that you chose. Considering the defensive themes, you can decide to go for a softer approach, using for example joint locks, strangulations, takedowns in order to get the situation under control, or you can of course use a harder way and using impacting to deal with the situation. So the third step, then you need to remove the attacker. You've probably chosen your favorite techniques, your favorite ways of dealing with different HAPVs. Now you just remove the attacker and practice the technique on your own while visualizing the actual application. And you do it over and over again, and sooner or later it will find its form. And this form will be like a solo component that you can drill over and over again and try to make it perfect. When I do this myself, I'm usually not very concerned if the solo component I end up with is, can I find it in a kata I know from before or not. It's not really relevant to me, but of course it's fun to discover new applications to old moves you know from before. So you make your choice yourself. If classical kata is very important to you, well then You can try to make your solo component look like something you know from before, from a certain kata, but if you're not very concerned about the history, well, then you can just make your own moves. As long as it's functional and good for your own body, then it's fine. Now in the final step, we want to take these solo components and put them together into a geometrical configuration. First, you might want to decide which techniques do you need to practice on both sides, and which are the ones that's enough to do it just on one side. Or if it's a completely symmetrical move, well, then you just need to do it once. A few things you might want to take into consideration when you put together the solo components is that you get a choreography that looks cool, that looks nice, is well balanced, hopefully has some rhythm between fast moves and maybe slower moves. We want to end facing the same way as we started, and I mean, historically it doesn't have any relevance, but if you end up on the same spot where you started, well, that's just a good thing. If you want to see an example of how you can do this process, please check my YouTube video, Karate, Keeping the Flame Alive. During the last 15 years or so, I put together a total of 10 different kata. Some of the kata are short and fairly simple, consisting mostly of basic techniques, and these I have used to introduce the concept of kata training to some of my beginning students. Some of the kata are more complex, some of them I train only by myself, and I'm not even intending to teach them to anyone, they're just for me, and a few kata are somewhere in between. I'm sure there are traditionalists that think I should burn in hell for doing this, but from a pedagogical and a practical point of view, it just makes sense. Obviously, this is not a challenge for the beginning students. Obviously, this is not a challenge for the beginning students, but if you have experience, I'm convinced that if you go through these steps to create your own kata, it could actually become the most important kata you know. And who knows, maybe that's the legacy that will live on, your legacy.